Damascus, Syria, June 1991. In a private dining room, a respected doctor named Dr. Faisal Rahman lifts a cognac glass and smiles at the woman across from him. Her name tonight is Nadine Caldwell, and her handbag holds a dead drop kit the size of a paperback. But Nadine isn't here to celebrate a business deal. 8 years earlier, a truck bomb erased the CIA station in Beirut. 17 officers gone in seconds. And this man is why. The waiter sets down dessert. Nadine decides the timing. One toast, one mistake, and the truth dies with him. Operation Cedar Vow. In the early 1980s, Jennifer Caldwell was a young CIA case officer built for fieldwork. Patient, detail-obsessed, able to make strangers feel understood within minutes of meeting them. She wasn't defined by childhood trauma or dramatic origin stories. We meet her through a formative operational lesson that hardened into doctrine. Her first overseas posting was Ankara in 1981. She was running a Turkish businessman who provided intelligence on Soviet military contractors moving equipment through the Black Sea corridor. The asset was reliable, careful, and productive. Then one Tuesday morning, he disappeared. Turkish security services found him 3 days later in a safe house basement with cigarette burns across his shoulders. The interrogation had been thorough. He'd given up 2 other CIA sources before dying. The post-mortem was brutal and simple. The asset had maintained the same coffee shop routine every Thursday morning for 11 months. Same table, same newspaper, same waitress who knew his order. Soviet counterintelligence had simply watched, mapped the pattern, and waited for the optimal extraction window. One predictable routine had killed 3 networks. Caldwell attended the closed-door debrief in the station chief's office. She listened to the communications officer explain how pattern recognition software had likely flagged the repetition. She watched senior officers argue about whether the asset had been careless or whether the operational environment had simply become too hostile. Then she walked back to her desk and rewrote every single routine in her own life. New routes to work, new grocery stores, new gym schedule, new cafe for breakfast that rotated weekly. By age 28, Jennifer Caldwell had developed a defining skill that would shape the next decade of her career. She could redesign her own life faster than an adversary could map it. She understood something most intelligence officers learned too late or never learned at all. The greatest operational security wasn't technology or tradecraft manuals. It was the willingness to become someone else completely, then discard that person before anyone noticed the seams. Then, April 18th, 1983, detonated her world. A suicide bomber drove a van loaded with 2,000 pounds of explosives into the U.S. Embassy in Beirut at precisely 13:07 hours local time. The blast collapsed the center of the Yawar 7-story building. 63 people died instantly. 17 were American citizens. The entire CIA Beirut station, 8 officers and support staff, was wiped out in less than 4 seconds. Station Chief Robert Ames, one of the agency's most experienced Middle East operatives, was found in the rubble 12 hours later. The operational impact was catastrophic. The station's safes had been blown open by the blast. Documents burned. Hard drives were destroyed. Source networks across Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan went dark within 48 hours as surviving assets assumed they'd been compromised and fled. The agency's entire Middle East operational architecture lost its keystone. Langley scrambled to rebuild from fragmentary records stored in Washington and scattered reports from officers who'd rotated out months earlier. In the immediate aftermath, the intelligence picture was chaos. Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility through a phone call to a Beirut newspaper. The claim was genuine. Voice analysis confirmed the caller matched previous, authenticated communications. But Islamic Jihad was an operational umbrella, not an organization with a clear command structure. Dozens of cells operated under that banner, some coordinated, many freelancing with loose ideological alignment and external sponsorship. In the debris of shattered intelligence networks, one name began surfacing in fragmentary reporting. Hassan Mahmood, age approximately 42. Lebanese national with extended family in the Bekaa Valley. Former civil engineer who'd worked on construction projects in Beirut and Damascus during the 1970s. No confirmed photograph, no verified current location, but multiple fragmentary intelligence reports from different sources. Intercepted phone calls, detainee interrogations in Israeli custody, a Turkish intelligence liaison report, suggested Mahmoud had provided technical planning for the embassy operation. Not the ideology, not the suicide bomber recruitment, not the martyrdom videos. Mahmoud's specialty was operational geometry. He understood how to calculate blast radius against building materials, how to time an attack when security was rotating shifts, how to turn a city's chaos into a guided weapon. He planned the how, not the why. 48 hours after the bombing, Mahmoud vanished. Syrian intelligence reported he'd crossed into the Bekaa Valley, Lebanon's eastern borderland controlled by Hezbollah and partially occupied by Syrian forces. From there, the trail went cold. The Bekaa was hostile terrain for American intelligence. No reliable liaison partners, heavy surveillance from multiple hostile services, and a population that viewed CIA officers as legitimate targets. For 18 months, the agency ran conventional collection operations. Signals intelligence swept communications patterns looking for Mahmoud's voice signature. Satellite imagery tracked movement in suspected safe houses. CIA officers met with sources in Beirut, Damascus, and Amman, offering substantial financial rewards for information. The operations produced fragments, possible sightings, unconfirmed rumors, third-hand reports, but nothing actionable. The strategy was classic post-blast counter-terror manhunting. Build a target package from scraps. Map travel patterns from hotel registries. Track family ties through wedding attendants and funeral visitor lists. Follow money through charity donations and construction payments. Monitor religious obligations, mosque attendance for Friday prayers, holiday travel patterns. Then pressure every seam until the person reappears or makes a mistake. Caldwell's doctrine was simple and brutal. Deny the adversary the comfort of anonymity. Make them understand that every identity has vulnerabilities. Every cover requires maintenance. Every lie eventually demands a supporting structure that can be penetrated, exploited, or destroyed. But traditional options kept failing. There was no stable arrest partner willing to coordinate a capture operation. Lebanese security services were fractured and penetrated by Hezbollah. Syrian services viewed Mahmoud as a useful asset, not a target. Iranian intelligence provided protection through Hezbollah networks. The battlefield kept shifting across Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, each country presenting different obstacles and hostile operational environments. 3 specific obstacles made the operation nearly impossible. First, Mahmoud's identity discipline. He didn't use consistent names, didn't maintain visible social media presence before such things existed, and rotated cover identities every 6 to 12 months based on fragmentary intelligence assessments. Second, protected corridors. Hezbollah-controlled areas in Lebanon and Iranian-supported networks in Syria gave him sanctuary the CIA couldn't penetrate with traditional surveillance. Third, Caldwell's own inability to stay emotionally neutral. Every briefing about Mahmoud included casualty lists from the embassy bombing, colleagues she'd known, mentors who'd taught her fieldcraft. The operation wasn't just professional necessity, it was personal debt. During a targeting review in late 1989, an analyst at Langley identified a pattern that changed the operational geometry. Financial intelligence from multiple banking sources showed recurring small payments flowing through reconstruction charities in Beirut, Damascus, and Tehran. The amounts were modest, $5,000 to $15,000 per transaction, and the timing was irregular enough to avoid algorithmic detection. But the financial signature kept reappearing. Same structuring patterns, same intermediary accounts, same ultimate recipients who were all connected to infrastructure rebuilding projects. The signature appeared in 6 different cities across 3 countries over 4 years. It looked exactly like what a careful operational planner would create. Not one large suspicious payment, but dozens of small, legitimate-looking transactions that collectively funded a protected lifestyle. The pattern was human, distinctive, like a fingerprint that wouldn't wash off. Caldwell saw the reporting during a counter-terror working group meeting in February 1990. She'd spent 6 years working other cases, but Mahmood had never left her target list. She read the financial analysis 3 times. Then she walked down to the 7th Floor Operations Directorate and requested reassignment. Her pitch was straightforward. Traditional hunting had failed because it assumed Mahmood would make operational mistakes. But Mahmood wasn't making operational mistakes. He was making human choices. He needed money for protection, for influence, for the lifestyle that made his cover believable. That financial need was the vulnerability. The authorization came through in April 1990. Caldwell was given operational control, a small team, and a timeline that was deliberately vague. No deadline, no pressure for quick results, just a mandate to build whatever was necessary and run it until the target package closed. By early May 1990, all planning elements were in position. But first, Caldwell needed to become someone else entirely. Not just a cover identity, an entire life with history, connections, and believable reasons to exist in the spaces where Mahmood operated. That transformation would take 8 months and cost her something permanent that she wouldn't fully understand until years later. Jennifer Caldwell built an operation that didn't chase Hassan Mahmood's body. It chased his needs. Over 8 years, she would cycle through 3 complete cover identities, each designed to pull a different kind of truth from different operational environments. The architecture was deliberate. Most CIA cover identities are thin. A false passport, a memorized backstory, enough detail to survive casual conversation, but designed for short-term deployment. Caldwell needed something deeper. She needed covers that could withstand sustained hostile scrutiny, that had digital footprints, that existed in public records and professional networks. She needed to become people who belonged in the rooms where operational planners felt safe enough to talk. The first cover took 4 months to build. Marie Dutoit, French freelance journalist specializing in Middle East reconstruction politics. The identity was supported by a genuine press credential from a small Lyon-based publication that occasionally accepted freelance submissions. Caldwell wrote 6 actual articles under Dutoit's byline between June and October 1990. 3 on Lebanese infrastructure rebuilding, 2 on Syrian economic policy, 1 on humanitarian corridors in Beirut. The articles were published. They generated modest professional recognition. They gave Dutoit credibility. The tradecraft was soft contact, cafes in Damascus and Beirut where reconstruction coordinators met, condolence visits to families affected by civil war, violence, where conversation naturally turned to who was funding rebuilding efforts. Notebook scribbles that were mostly blank, but looked like a journalist gathering background. Du Toit asked questions without looking like she was asking questions. She listened more than she spoke. She made sources feel intelligent when they explained complex funding mechanisms or security arrangements. Du Toit's operational purpose was reconnaissance, mapping who had influence, who controlled money, who provided security consultation. Over 11 months, the identity generated 43 contact reports. 31 were operationally useless. 9 provided fragmentary intelligence on reconstruction finance networks. 3 identified a pattern. Certain high-level advisors in Damascus were connected to charitable organizations with the same financial signature Langley analysts had flagged. One name appeared twice in unrelated conversations. Dr. Faisal Rahman, security consultant, discreet, well-connected, someone who understood how systems broke. Caldwell retired the Du Toit identity in May 1991 using a standard intelligence practice called legend termination. Du Toit accepted a journalism fellowship in Paris and stopped filing stories from the Middle East. The identity simply faded from visibility, leaving behind a coherent professional history that could survive background investigation, but no longer required active maintenance. The second cover was different in texture and purpose. Elena Karim, UN Relief Coordinator working with infrastructure assessment teams. This identity required deeper institutional support. Credentials that could survive verification through UN administrative channels, professional relationships with actual relief workers, technical knowledge of logistics coordination. The cover was built through a CIA liaison arrangement with a UN office in Geneva. Elena Karim's employment file was inserted into administrative records showing a 3-year history with refugee services in East Africa before transfer to Middle East operations. The file included performance reviews, payroll records, and email correspondence with genuine UN staff who'd been briefed to support the cover without understanding its intelligence purpose. Karim's operational access was different from Du Toit's. Relief coordinators spoke with logisticians, truck drivers, warehouse managers, supply chain contractors, the people who saw everything, because moving humanitarian aid meant navigating security checkpoints, paying informal fees to local power brokers, and understanding exactly who controlled which roads and border crossings. These were people who talked. Logistics professionals took pride in solving impossible problems and often bragged about the connections that made their work possible. Karim deployed to Damascus in July 1991. She planted 2 cutouts, intermediary contacts who could receive rumors and filter out deliberate disinformation. One was a Syrian warehouse manager who genuinely worked with UN operations and occasionally reported interesting conversations to Karim. The other was a Lebanese transport coordinator who'd been developed as a CIA asset 3 years earlier and understood his actual purpose. Both cutouts knew fragments of what Karim needed, but neither understood the complete operational picture. During a logistics coordination meeting in September 1991, the warehouse manager mentioned that a security advisor named Dr. Rahman had helped resolve a customs dispute involving medical supply shipments. The advisor had influence with Syrian officials. He understood bureaucratic pressure points. He'd resolved the problem with 3 phone calls. The warehouse manager was grateful and impressed. Caldwell noted the report and cross-referenced it against Du Toit's earlier intelligence. Dr. Faisal Rahman was becoming more visible, not reckless, not exposed, but present enough in professional circles that his name surfaced naturally when competent people discussed security problem solving. That visibility suggested confidence. Confidence suggested he felt protected. Protection suggested vulnerability, because protected people eventually stop watching their own perimeter as carefully. Caldwell retired the Karim identity in November 1991 using a standard rotation cover story. UN assignment complete, transfer to different regional office. Forwarding address available through official channels, but no longer operationally active in Syria or Lebanon. The third cover took the longest to build and cost the most to maintain. Nadine Caldwell, wealthy Lebanese-American investor focusing on Beirut reconstruction opportunities. The identity kept Jennifer's actual first name, a calculated decision that reduced cognitive load when responding to casual conversation and minimized the risk of momentary hesitation that could signal deception. The business infrastructure was extensive. A Delaware-registered holding company with legitimate incorporation documents. 2 escrow accounts in Lebanese and Cypriot banks containing actual funds, not CIA money, but loans that would eventually be recovered through administrative channels. A portfolio of 3 small reconstruction projects in Beirut that were genuinely under contract. A residential building repair, a warehouse restoration, an electrical grid upgrade. The projects were real. They employed actual contractors. They generated paperwork and tax documentation. The investment cover provided something the previous identities couldn't: financial credibility. Nadine Caldwell had money and was willing to spend it on projects that required local expertise and security coordination. That combination, capital plus need for protection, was precisely what would appeal to someone like Hassan Mahmood, operating under the name Dr. Faisal Rahman. The support infrastructure was minimal by design. Burner addresses consisted of 2 safe mail drops, one in Beirut through a commercial mail service, one in Damascus through a contact who operated a small importing business. Communication security used a rotating surveillance detection route built around 3 landmarks in Damascus: the Umayyad Mosque, the Hamidiyya Souk Market, and the National Museum. The route allowed Caldwell to identify hostile surveillance by tracking whether the same faces appeared at multiple geographically separated locations within a short time frame. The team structure stayed deliberately small. Caldwell served as primary operative. One communications officer in the Damascus embassy provided encrypted message relay to Langley. One local fixer, a Syrian businessman who'd worked with CIA for 6 years, provided logistical support and local knowledge without ever hearing the complete operational story. The fixer believed he was supporting business intelligence collection related to reconstruction corruption. He didn't know about Mahmood. He didn't know about the Beirut bombing. He knew only that Nadine Caldwell needed introductions to security consultants and that his compensation was generous. A single code word controlled operational escalation: harvest. If Caldwell transmitted that word through any communication channel, it meant target confirmation and imminent action. Support elements would activate exfiltration protocols, prepare documentation destruction, and position assets for rapid extraction if compromise appeared likely. In early January 1991, a financial intelligence report landed on Caldwell's desk that changed the operational geometry completely. A man using the name Dr. Faisal Rahman had opened a consulting account with a Damascus bank in November 1990. The account showed regular deposits from 3 different sources: a construction firm, a logistics company, and a charitable foundation focused on refugee services. The amounts were modest but consistent. The financial signature matched fragmentary intelligence patterns Langley had been tracking for 4 years. More importantly, Rahman's consulting profile matched operational behavior. He was advising on security for influential circles, business leaders, government contractors, humanitarian organizations. It was exactly the kind of role an operational planner would choose. respected, insulated from direct scrutiny, surrounded by people who kept secrets for a living because their own business interests depended on discretion. Caldwell didn't pounce. Premature contact would signal intelligence awareness and force Rahman to disappear again. Instead, she engineered coincidence through patient operational development. The approach took 3 months of careful positioning. Caldwell used her investment identity to attend a February 1991 business networking event at the Damascus International Conference Center focused on reconstruction financing. The event was semi-public, approximately 80 attendees, mostly Syrian businessmen and foreign investors, enough crowd density for anonymous observation. She didn't approach Rahman directly. She positioned herself in his visual proximity during a panel discussion and made sure her business card circulated through mutual professional contacts. 2 weeks later, a Syrian contractor working on one of Caldwell's Beirut projects mentioned that he'd spoken with a security consultant who might be valuable for protecting construction equipment from theft. The consultant's name was Dr. Faisal Rahman. The contractor offered to make an introduction. Caldwell waited 4 days before responding. Eager investors don't wait. Careful investors do their research. She sent a message through the contractor saying she'd be interested in a preliminary conversation about security consultation. The message included her business background and current project portfolio. Professional, businesslike, slightly formal in the way that wealthy diaspora Lebanese Americans approached Middle East commerce. The first meeting occurred on March 12, 1991, at a cafe near the Umayyad Mosque. Caldwell arrived at 14:30 hours. Rahman arrived at 14:45. He was approximately 48 years old, graying at the temples, wearing a well-tailored suit that suggested success without ostentation. His handshake was firm. His Arabic carried a Lebanese accent with Syrian inflections, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd lived in both countries for extended periods. The conversation lasted 47 minutes. Caldwell pitched a straightforward business problem. She was investing in Beirut reconstruction, but needed security consultation for projects in contested neighborhoods. Equipment theft was damaging profit margins. She needed someone who understood local power structures and could negotiate informal protection arrangements without creating legal exposure. Rahman listened more than he spoke. He asked careful questions about her background, her financing sources, her timeline for project completion. The questions felt like due diligence, but Caldwell recognized them as security vetting. He was mapping her credibility, checking for inconsistencies, testing whether her story held together under casual interrogation. She passed the test by keeping her answers emotionally true, even when the facts were false. The best lies aren't fabrications. They're genuine feelings wrapped around strategic omissions. When Rahman asked about her motivation for investing in Beirut, she talked about family connections and the desire to rebuild something meaningful. All technically true, just not in the way Rahman understood. When he asked about her financial backing, she discussed investor partnerships and escrow arrangements, all verifiable through documentation that had been carefully constructed to survive investigation. Rahman concluded the meeting by saying he'd consider the opportunity and would be in touch within 10 days. Caldwell left the cafe and ran a 3-hour surveillance detection route before returning to her Damascus apartment. No hostile surveillance detected. No indication the meeting had triggered security concern. Rahman contacted her 8 days later through the Syrian contractor. He was willing to provide consultation on a contract basis. His fee structure was reasonable. Monthly retainer plus performance bonuses tied to measurable security outcomes. He proposed a second meeting to formalize arrangements. The second meeting occurred on March 28, 1991, at Rahman's office in a professional complex near the Damascus business district. The office was modest but well-appointed, leather furniture, Persian rugs, a desk organized with the precision of someone who valued control. During 90 minutes of discussion, Rahman outlined his approach. He had connections with local security coordinators in Beirut. He could arrange informal protection agreements. He understood how to structure payments that wouldn't appear in official records, but would guarantee results. Caldwell agreed to a 3-month trial contract. The business relationship was established. Over the next 6 weeks, Rahman demonstrated competence. Theft incidents at Caldwell's Beirut projects declined by 70%. Equipment losses stopped. The security improvements were genuine. Rahman had delivered exactly what he'd promised. During this operational phase, Caldwell experienced what intelligent psychologists call legend drift. The boundaries between Jennifer Caldwell and Nadine Caldwell began blurring. When she reviewed financial reports for her reconstruction projects, she sometimes caught herself genuinely caring about profit margins and contractor performance. Before remembering, these were operational props, not actual business concerns. When Rahman called to discuss security updates, her responses came naturally, without the conscious translation from actual identity to cover identity. In a post-operation psychological assessment 3 years later, the agency psychiatrist would note that prolonged deep cover deployment creates a specific cognitive strain. The operative must maintain 2 complete identities simultaneously while preventing either from contaminating the other. The strain isn't dramatic, it's cumulative. Small daily choices about which personality to inhabit, whether to maintain the cover when alone, how much of the false identity to integrate into permanent self-concept. The assessment concluded that Caldwell had managed the strain within acceptable operational parameters, but that some personality integration was permanent and irreversible. By late May 1991, Rahman had grown comfortable enough with the business relationship to suggest expanding their partnership. He mentioned connections in Damascus who were interested in similar reconstruction investment opportunities. He proposed introducing Caldwell to influential figures who controlled significant capital and needed sophisticated investors with international experience. The proposal was a significant operational indicator. Rahman felt confident enough in her identity to risk his own professional credibility by making introductions to his network. That confidence suggested he'd completed his own background investigation and found her story credible. More importantly, it suggested he was positioning himself for deeper financial relationships that would increase his value to her business interests. Caldwell accepted the proposal and suggested they formalize the expanded partnership over dinner at a private venue where they could discuss details without interruption. She framed it as a celebration of successful collaboration and an opportunity to plan future projects. Rahman agreed and proposed a restaurant he knew well. Discreet, high quality, appropriate for serious business discussion. The date was set for June 17, 1991. A complication emerged in early June that nearly destroyed the entire operational sequence. A rival security advisor named Kamal Haddad began asking questions about Nadine Caldwell's background through mutual business contacts in Beirut. Haddad was a former Syrian military intelligence officer who now operated as a private security consultant. He was territorial about clients and suspicious of foreign investors who appeared suddenly with substantial capital. Caldwell assessed the threat through her fixer contact. Haddad had made inquiries at 2 Lebanese banks about Caldwell's financial transfers. He'd contacted a contractor who'd worked on one of her projects, asking about the actual scope of work and payment arrangements. The questions weren't overtly hostile, but they demonstrated professional counterintelligence awareness. The operational response was decisive. Caldwell sacrificed a clean asset to create noise elsewhere. She had her communications officer leak information through a different channel, suggesting that a Syrian business competitor was trying to disrupt Haddad's own consulting contracts. The information was partially true. Haddad did have business competitors, and the leak created enough confusion that Haddad shifted his attention to defending his own client relationships rather than investigating Caldwell's background. The incident cost the agency a source who'd been productive for 2 years. The source's cover was deliberately burned through controlled exposure to protect Caldwell's operational priority. The calculation was brutal, but standard. Long-term strategic operations sometimes require sacrificing valuable assets to preserve critical mission elements. Then Rahman tested her with questions that revealed sophisticated counterintelligence awareness. During a June 10th phone conversation about dinner logistics, he casually mentioned a neighborhood in Beirut where Caldwell had claimed to have family connections. He asked about street names, specific landmarks, the name of a local cafe that had been popular in the 1970s. The questions felt conversational, but Caldwell recognized them as verification probes. She passed by relying on a principle that had shaped her entire operational approach. The best covers aren't built on memorized facts. They're built on emotional authenticity. She didn't try to recall specific street names. Instead, she talked about the feeling of visiting that neighborhood as a child, the smell of coffee from shops, the way her uncle would take her to buy sweets on Friday afternoons. The details were generic enough to be unverifiable, but specific enough to feel genuine. Her Arabic carried slight emotional weight when describing the memory. Not dramatic, just the subtle vocal shift that occurs when people recall actual experiences. Rahman accepted the response. The suspicion, if it existed, dissipated. The window opened when Rahman himself proposed they celebrate their partnership expansion with a private dinner on June 17th. His mistake wasn't arrogance. It was routine. He'd completed his security assessment. He'd verified her business credentials. He'd concluded she represented exactly what she appeared to be: a wealthy investor who needed his expertise and could generate profitable collaboration. He didn't see the trap because the trap looked like opportunity. June 17th, 1991. The restaurant was located in the Al-Medzeh district of Damascus, a neighborhood popular with professional-class Syrians and foreign business visitors. The venue was upscale but not ostentatious. White tablecloths, subdued lighting, a menu focused on traditional Levantine cuisine with French influences. The private dining room Rahman had reserved seated 8 people, but would accommodate only 2 that evening. Caldwell arrived at 2012 hours, 18 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. The early arrival served the multiple operational purposes. She controlled environmental variables. She observed the venue layout. She identified 2 security guards stationed near the main entrance. Private security, not government surveillance. She noted 1 corridor leading to the kitchen and service areas. She confirmed 1 primary exit through the main entrance and 1 secondary exit through the kitchen corridor. The private dining room was positioned at the rear of the restaurant with a single entrance from the main corridor. The room contained 1 table, 6 chairs arranged around it, and ambient lighting controlled by a dimmer switch near the door. Caldwell adjusted the lighting to a level that was bright enough for normal conversation, but subdued enough to create the intimate atmosphere appropriate for business celebration. She positioned herself at the chair facing the entrance so she would see Rahman arrive and could control the immediate visual dynamic. At 2019 hours, Dr. Faisal Rahman entered the restaurant. He wore a dark suit with a burgundy tie. He carried a leather portfolio folder. His demeanor was relaxed, the body language of someone attending a pleasant professional dinner, not someone expecting threat. He believed he was meeting money, not memory. A waiter escorted him to the private dining room. Rahman entered, smiled, and extended his hand for a greeting. Caldwell rose, shook his hand, and gestured to the chair opposite hers. They exchanged pleasantries about the traffic, the restaurant's reputation, the quality of the wine selection. At 20:27 hours, the first toast occurred. Rahman raised his glass and offered a traditional Arabic blessing for successful partnership and mutual prosperity. Caldwell raised her glass in response. She allowed the glass to touch her lips, but didn't drink substantially. Throughout the evening, she would mirror Rahman's drinking pattern, matching his pace to avoid standing out, but consuming less than half of what he consumed. Alert without appearing vigilant. The conversation flowed through practiced business discussion. Rahman talked about potential investors he wanted to introduce. Caldwell discussed expansion possibilities for Beirut projects. They ordered appetizers, then entrees. The food arrived in courses spaced approximately 20 minutes apart. Standard fine dining pacing that created natural conversational rhythm. At 20:41 hours, the decisive moment occurred. It wasn't a gadget. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. The method was designed to leave no cinematic spy move, only the kind of small action people forget they saw. The waiter set down dessert, 2 small plates of baklava with Turkish coffee. Rahman was discussing a construction timeline, gesturing with his hands to illustrate a project schedule. Caldwell's tradecraft was non-explanatory on purpose. The action resembled misfortune rather than operation. The man who'd planned the death of 63 people in Beirut didn't see the weapon because the weapon was trust. The compound was absorbed through mucosal tissue contact, tasteless, odorless, designed to mimic cardiac arrest in subjects with pre-existing cardiovascular markers. Rahman had mentioned heart medication during an earlier conversation, a casual detail about managing blood pressure that he'd shared to explain why he avoided certain high-stress consulting assignments. That detail had been noted in Caldwell's operational file. The agency's medical assessment team had concluded the compound would present as natural death in someone with documented cardiac history. Within 90 seconds, Rahman's speech pattern changed. He paused mid-sentence, his expression shifting to confusion. He raised his hand to his chest. The cardiac disruption was rapid, but not instantaneous. His breathing became irregular. He tried to stand, grasped the edge of the table for support, then collapsed backward into his chair. Caldwell stood and moved around the table. She called for the waiter with controlled urgency, loud enough to summon help, not loud enough to create panic. The waiter entered at a run. A security guard followed moments later. Caldwell stepped back, creating space for their response while maintaining the posture of a concerned business associate witnessing a medical emergency. Rahman's breathing stopped at 20:43 hours and 16 seconds. The security guard checked for pulse and found none. The waiter ran to call emergency services. Within minutes, other restaurant staff had arrived. Someone produced a blanket to cover the body. A manager spoke with Caldwell, taking her statement. She provided details in a shocked, slightly disoriented tone, appropriate for someone who just watched a dinner companion die without warning. She mentioned they'd been celebrating a business partnership. She described how he'd complained of feeling unwell during dessert. She noted he'd mentioned heart medication earlier in their relationship. She offered to provide contact information for the investigation. The manager thanked her and suggested she wait in the lobby while authorities arrived. At 21:03 hours, Caldwell exited through the main entrance with the same posture she'd entered with. Measured steps, composed expression, the appearance of someone shaken by unexpected tragedy, but maintaining professional bearing. In the car, a rental sedan parked 4 blocks away to avoid associating her vehicle with the restaurant's immediate vicinity, She sat motionless for 17 seconds. Then she exhaled once. Not relief, not celebration. The exhalation was something more complex. The release of tension held for 8 years, the acknowledgement that a debt had been closed, the recognition that what she'd just done couldn't be undone or justified except through the cold mathematics of prevented future deaths versus moral compromise. She started the car and drove to her Damascus apartment using a surveillance detection route that took 90 minutes to cover 8 kilometers. No hostile surveillance detected. At the apartment, she burned the contents of her handbag in the kitchen sink using a steel bowl and lighter fluid. Dead drop kit, operational notes, backup documentation for the Nadine Caldwell identity. She flushed the ashes. She showered, washing away trace evidence, even though the compound left no detectable residue. At 02:15 hours, she transmitted a single encrypted message through the communications officer to Langley. The message contained one word: harvest. Operation Cedar Vow was complete. Nothing felt clean. The death was discovered officially at 20:46 hours when Damascus emergency services arrived at the restaurant. Paramedics confirmed cardiac arrest with no viable resuscitation possibility. The body was transported to a municipal hospital for standard medical examination. Syrian authorities opened a routine investigation into sudden death in a public location. The initial medical assessment concluded natural causes. Dr. Faisal Rahman was 48 years old with documented cardiovascular issues requiring prescription medication. The autopsy report noted cardiac arrhythmia consistent with acute myocardial infarction. Toxicology screening detected no unusual substances. The compound Caldwell had used was designed by agency medical specialists to mimic endogenous stress hormones that trigger fatal arrhythmias in subjects with compromised cardiac function. It metabolized within 6 hours, leaving no chemical signature distinguishable from the body's natural response to cardiac failure. The cover story held because Hassan Mahmood had built his life around exactly this kind of plausibility. Dr. Faisal Rahman was a respected security consultant with established professional relationships, legitimate business activities, and a medical history that explained sudden death. The identity was so carefully constructed that even hostile investigation found nothing inconsistent. Syrian security services conducted standard follow-up investigation focused on whether Rahman's death might have intelligence implications. They interviewed the restaurant staff, reviewed Caldwell's identity documentation, and contacted Lebanese business associates to verify her background. Every inquiry led to verifiable information, because Caldwell's cover had been built with precisely this level of scrutiny in mind. After 3 weeks, Syrian authorities closed the investigation with a finding of death by natural causes. Officially, there was no operation. There was no Jennifer Caldwell. There was no Hassan Mahmood. There was only Dr. Faisal Rahman, who died of heart failure during a business dinner, and Nadine Caldwell, a Lebanese-American investor who returned to Beirut 2 weeks later and gradually wound down her reconstruction investments over the following 6 months before relocating to Cyprus. In headquarters language, the outcome was recorded as target removed from operational environment through natural attrition. In private, the agency understood what Caldwell had actually accomplished. She'd spent 8 years turning herself into an instrument sharp enough to cut through protected space. She'd built 3 complete identities, each layered with documentation and behavioral authenticity. She'd sacrificed operational assets to maintain her cover. She'd engineered proximity to a target who'd evaded conventional intelligence operations for nearly a decade. And she'd executed a termination operation in hostile territory without detection, compromise, or diplomatic incident. The strategic assessment was mixed. The removal of Hassan Mahmood eliminated a skilled operational planner whose technical expertise had enabled mass casualty attacks. Intelligence analysts concluded his death likely disrupted several planned operations that were in development stages. The absence of his planning capability forced hostile organizations to rely on less sophisticated operatives who made mistakes that led to operational failures and arrests. But the operation also created secondary consequences. Mahmoud's death fueled paranoia within operational networks. Security advisors across Syria and Lebanon tightened their protective protocols. Foreign business contacts faced increased scrutiny. The operational environment became measurably more hostile for American intelligence collection. Networks that had been accessible through business cover became suspicious of any unfamiliar foreign presence. The operation achieved a tactical end state while worsening the long-term intelligence environment. For Caldwell personally, the cost was permanent identity fragmentation. She couldn't fully return to being Jennifer Caldwell. 8 years of deep cover deployment had integrated operational personas into her core identity structure. The post-operation psychological assessment noted she sometimes responded to Nadine before consciously correcting. She maintained habits from her cover identities, specific phrases in Arabic, preferences for certain foods, gestural patterns copied from the people she'd pretended to be. The agency rotated her out of field operations in early 1992. She spent 2 years in counterintelligence training roles at Camp Peary before leaving the CIA in 1994. Former colleagues who maintained contact reported she relocated to Montreal and worked as a private security consultant. She never married. She rarely discussed her operational history. The few people who knew what she'd done in Damascus understood that some operations don't end when the target is removed. They end when the operative can no longer distinguish between the person they were and the people they became. The operational methodology became a classified case study taught in advanced tradecraft courses. The template was identity-driven manhunting. Long dwell covers built with extensive documentation, financial access operations that exploited human needs rather than technical vulnerabilities. And the uncomfortable lesson that the most effective weapon is often a relationship built on a lie. The case raised a fundamental question that intelligence services never fully resolve. Was Hassan Mahmood a legitimate military target whose planning capability represented ongoing threat? Or was his removal an extrajudicial killing that violated the boundaries separating intelligence work from state-sponsored assassination? The answer depended entirely on whether you believed preventing future mass casualties justified eliminating someone who could never be arrested, tried, or imprisoned through conventional legal processes. One perspective argues Caldwell did what courts and diplomacy could not. Mahmood had planned an attack that killed 63 people. He operated in territory where he couldn't be arrested. He possessed expertise that would enable future attacks. Traditional justice wasn't possible. Caldwell's operation prevented deaths by ending a mastermind who would never face trial. The moral calculation was clear. Preventing future mass casualties outweighs the violation of one individual's due process rights when that individual has already demonstrated willingness and capability to orchestrate mass murder. The alternative perspective argues Caldwell crossed the line that separates intelligence from vengeance. She used deception not to collect truth, but to deliver a private sentence. She spent 8 years building trust with someone, then exploited that trust to kill him without trial, without evidence presented in court, without any accountability except internal agency authorization. The operation made the United States no different from the terrorists it opposed, both sides claiming their violence was justified by the righteousness of their cause. The truth reveals more about your worldview than about Hassan Mahmood or Jennifer Caldwell. If you believe some threats are so dangerous that conventional legal processes become dangerous luxuries, then Caldwell was a hero who prevented future Beirut bombings. If you believe the rule of law must apply even to dangerous people in difficult circumstances, then Caldwell was a killer who chose revenge over justice and made the world less safe by proving intelligence services can't be trusted to operate within legal and moral boundaries. What's your take? If you had proof someone engineered mass murder but could never be arrested, would you call it justice to eliminate them? Or does that make you the same kind of threat you're hunting? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you question where the line is between prevention and revenge, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to understand how intelligence actually works when the enemy is too protected for courts and too dangerous for patience.